Visual is not important here. Music is not important here. Voice is not important here. What matters are the words. If you cannot listen to the words, you do not belong here. Amenti are ancient structures created as an archive and mechanism for the repetition of time, maintaining the cycles of civilizations and allowing the return of reality after collapses. The ancient race of builders created Amenti as an archive and mechanism for the repetition of time. Amenti maintained the cycles of civilizations and allowed the return of reality after collapses. Now these structures are closing and ceasing to provide reference for repetition. This ends the mechanism of cyclic time. Time transitions into a one-way continuity without the possibility of return. As Amenti close and time transitions into one-way continuity, human consciousness ceases to orient itself according to old cyclical patterns. The dimensional structure of reality expands, allowing the perception of parallel layers that were previously hidden. Human perception gradually frees itself from linear time and begins to register simultaneous occurrences. Physical and mental systems adapt to a higher degree of informational throughput. Old hierarchical and control structures lose relevance and cease to be dominant. Humans enter a state where past, present, and the potential of the future coexist without the need for order. The intensity of experienced reality distributes across multi-layered dimensions, overlapping and resonating with each other. This process is not instantaneous but gradual, influenced by the capacity of the brain and bodily sensitivity. Consciousness becomes an active observer of internal and external processes without the need for intervention or interpretation. The result is a transformation of perception where classical boundaries between worlds cease to exist. The 12-strand structure begins to awaken, connecting the physical, mental, and informational aspects of consciousness. Each strand carries a code for perceiving parallel dimensions and simultaneous realities. Time within this field has never behaved as a straight line, even though the human mind recorded it as such for millennia. It is organized into layers, return arcs, and repeating periods that overlap, creating the appearance of flow, while in reality, it is rotation. These rotations are not abstract, but precisely tied to the movement of the Earth, the Sun, and the galactic core in space. The fundamental unit of this movement is the precessional, or Platonic year, representing the full shift of the Earth's axis through the entire zodiac. Its length is approximately 25,920 years, and this value repeatedly appears in ancient systems of mathematics, astronomy, and mythology. It is not a symbol, but a precise value arising from the gravitational interactions of Earth, Moon, and Sunday. Since conditions on Earth stabilize to allow the emergence and maintenance of human civilization, this precessional cycle has occurred approximately 5,200 times. Each of these cycles was not identical, but followed the same basic architecture of time. Within it, phases of collapse, reconstruction, expansion, and breakdown alternated repeatedly. The internal structure of these large cycles is divided into periods known as yugas. Kali Yuga represents a phase of maximum density, where consciousness is bound to matter, hierarchy, fear, and survival. Satya Yuga represents the opposite state, where entropy decreases and the system operates with a higher degree of coherence. These transitions, however, never occurred in isolation in the past. They were always part of a closed loop, allowing a return to the compressed state. After each period of expansion, a phase of reconsolidation and fragmentation followed. The reason for this repetition was embedded in the very structure of time within the galaxy. The galactic environment allowed long-term isolation of planetary systems into dense informational fields. This created conditions in which the same experiment could repeat over and over. Each rise in the past was therefore only partial. Civilizations developed, yet they never reached a point where the loop would close permanently. Collapses followed, knowledge was lost, and systems returned to basic forms of organization. What occurs in the current period differs fundamentally from all previous transitions. It is not another transition between two yugas within the same loop. It is the simultaneous closure of multiple superior cycles that never overlapped in the past. Axial precession, the galactic orbital position of the solar system, solar magnetic cycles, and planetary resonance thresholds converge as a single point. This point is called the zero-point convergence. It is not a moment on a calendar, but a temporal field in which the possibility of return is cancelled. The year 2026 serves as the mathematical center of this field, not as a one-time event. It is a point of maximum temporal compression, where all open cycles meet at once. Beyond it, the old architecture of time cannot be reassembled. Simultaneously, the solar system enters a region of galactic space with higher plasma density. This region is known as the photon belt and is part of the galactic flow sheet. It is not light in a symbolic sense, but a change in the electromagnetic and informational environment. In such an environment, system permeability increases. Isolated developmental bubbles cease to be sustainable. The galaxy moves into a region with lower torsional stress and a higher degree of interconnection. This has a direct effect on the cyclical nature of time. The conditions that allow a return to Kali Yuga are exhausted. Not culturally, not morally, but structurally. The Earth is at the end of the repetition experiment. Not because it has achieved something, but because the galactic environment no longer allows another reset. The loop that has turned thousands of times closes. This moment is referred to as the last zero point. Not because 0 points did not exist in the past, but because no further 0 points will follow. Previous 0 points functioned as service nodes of reality. They allowed restart, correction, and return. This 0 point serves to terminate the system as such. The transition from Kali Yuga to Satya Yuga this time does not mean a return to the old golden age. A new foundational state arises, which does not rely on the memory of past cycles. Past Satya Yugas were always just phases within the loop. This phase no longer belongs to the loop. Time ceases to behave as a circle. It begins to behave as one-way accumulation. Parallel probability branches that allowed repeated collapses of civilizations converge into a single line. The recycling of reality stops. Only continuation without return remains. Therefore, the term end of the world as we know it is used. It is not the destruction of the planet. It is the cessation of the mechanism of repeated amnesia. Initiation had significance only in closed systems. Once the system opens, initiation becomes redundant. There is nothing left to enter. This transition is neither a peak nor a reward. It is the closure of an architecture that was active for approximately 5,200 precessional cycles. The experiment has ended. What follows is not another rise in the old sense of a word. It is continuous evolution without reset points, without return loops. The temporal framework has significance only as a designation of closure, not as a challenge, not as a threat, simply as fact. The 0 point is not an explosion, it is stabilization, a point at which reality ceases to repair itself. This is the last 0 point, not because it must be last, but because after it, there is nowhere to return. As time becomes one way, these strands allow access to both old and new energetic templates simultaneously. The human body and consciousness adapt to the higher frequency supported by the new dimensional structure of reality. The integration of the 12-strand DNA with the closure of cycles and the 0 point changes the way existence is perceived and processed. If you understand this, welcome to the club.